The Academy Awards comes to us on March 4th, 2014, and for casual moviegoers or those, like ourselves, in regions where close-by movie theaters can be short pickings, and often are not carrying most of the Academy-nominated films, it can be difficult to approach the awards show with a whole lot of enthusiasm. Oh look, The Godfather's wife and the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants worn by Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep is nominated. Too bad this allegedly fantastic beast exists with nowhere to find it. Put it in a pile with the rest of the nominations. Nevertheless, Scott Moore and myself, and Mishmashers.com look to make a devout effort at sharing our thoughts on at least a few Academy Award nominated movies, before the show reels in its artsy, a little bit pretentious self onto our television screens. For instance, in a couple of days on Mishmashers.com, I will have my review of The Shape of Water available for all of you, and while you're there, you can also go ahead and check out Scott Moore's written review of Mindhunters, a television series brought to you by the director of films like Fight Club and Seven. That said, and moving on, for this video, Scott and I will be watching a film from another beloved director of ours, Christopher Nolan. For those that aren't familiar with the film, Dunkirk is a war film and reflects on the Dunkirk evacuation during World War II. The film received high marks from critics as well as moviegoers, and was able to make $500 million at the box office. For starters, what are your thoughts? Or if not necessarily, what would you tell someone heading into this film?
Let me stop that and let me ask you one thing. And if you could think of it at the top of your head and as quick as you possibly can, what is one word you use to describe this movie?
Boring.
I would say listless. And the reason I'm going to say listless is because I spent an hour and 5 minutes of my life watching this movie and thinking at some point it has to get better, right? It doesn't get better because after that pause, I continued on to the movie, and I'm going to say that this movie never, ever, ever got better. Christopher Nolan is known in his movies for the big culmination, the big finish. You know, that burst where it's a slow burning fuse, and you're going to get to the end, and you're gonna get an explosion. Just matters how long it takes to get there. I didn't get that. And whenever you gave me this list of movies that were going to be on the Academy Awards, I told you the exact same things. I said, man, they sound like a bunch of artsy farty crap. And most of the time they are. Most of the time, I've never even seen one of these movies, yet they're getting nominated for an award. So who in the world watched these movies to nominate them?
Something I think's worth getting across too is that we might be cynics, but we're not cynical. We are fans of Christopher Nolan. You yourself are a big fan of the movie Inception.
I
I
like
think we
Inception.
both agree that Memento's great.
Memento is one of the best
Uh,
movies of all time.
I didn't necessarily love Inception. You loved Inception. I loved The Dark Knight. You didn't necessarily love The Dark Knight. Uh, I'm a big fan of Interstellar. Uh, Big fan of Insomnia, or at least I think Insomnia is a good film. I like those films. I enjoyed them, and I think that they're very good. So we went into this film, and we actually had some expectations for him. He's a good director, and we respect him as a director. So we weren't going into it expecting just to hate it. We were hoping for a legitimately good film.
Right, and I went in thinking that Dunkirk was going to be a good film, not only because it had Christopher Nolan's name attached to it, but I had heard that it was a good experience. And while in the end, what I want to say is that all it was an experience. That's it. There was no character development. There was very little talking amongst characters. Uh, for the first 35 to 40 minutes of the movie, I don't even remember any words that were said.
There was definitely some dialogue in the
But very
beginning, but
little.
it was very minimalist. I think
It
that
started when the guy in the plane came. He actually had some dialogue about the war, but
yeah. What's curious about this, and I think this is pretty interesting, this movie is by far the shortest movie Christopher Nolan has done, except for The Following, which was like his student film. It's actually the shortest film he's ever done, which is ridiculous to think about because I'm like, that felt like the longest Christopher Nolan movie I've
oh,
ever watched.
it was dragging. Like I said, there was no character development. And usually in a movie, I want character development. We did a podcast not too long ago on the experience of walkthrough games, games that
Yeah, like walking simulators.
right. And I think that's what this movie was. I just watched a walking simulator movie where I felt like I was there, but there was no character development or anything like that. It was just more of like I put on VR goggles and I was there. But let me ask you a question because one of the things that I found was that there was a really weird aspect of this movie that I wasn't ready for. People told me that it was going to be like a virtual reality war. You were going to feel it. You were going to get that experience. One of the weird things, and I don't know if you noticed, there was no blood. There was no destruction really. And I understand that 90% of war is you're sitting there and you have, long episodes of lull, followed by, long episodes of depression, followed by, absolutely nothing happening. And then, like, for like 90 seconds of the war, you're freaking out, you're fearful, things are going on, boom, 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 boom. But there was no blood, and like the death was like very minimal, or if it was death, you didn't see it. This was a
Well,
PG
you
war
did.
movie.
I mean, well, you did see some deaths. Like at some points, there were explosions going off. You saw people flying around. You saw bodies coming in from the
But it was
ocean.
more like it reminded me more of like dolls flying
Like it was,
around, and you
like
like
it was
it was
protective over it. Like
right.
it kept it from being too gory. Um,
It was almost like the Ninja Turtles came in and started kicking people, and like that guy's down, he's probably hurt, but is he dead? I don't know because we don't go into it.
I want to give this film at least some accolades, some recognition for certain things that I thought were worth singling out and worth pointing out. The sound editing was very, very good. There were a lot. There were some moments where I never felt like I cared about this film. I'll be honest with you. I never felt like I cared about anything that was going on. But there were moments into it where I thought if this movie had a better character development, had more of a strong narrative, then I would have cared. Certain instances, like when the ship was sinking and it had that dramatic music playing in the background, I'm like, that was really cool. Or at least not, like, it could have meant more if it was done better. It reminds me in some way of, there's a director, his name is Michael Haneke. And he's done films from a bunch of different languages. Maybe you've heard of some movies like Funny Games. He's got one movie called Benny's Video, and it's called A Horror of Personality. And what he tries to do with it is he's trying to talk about a serial killer or a murderer, and it's about this boy who accidentally kills this small girl. And what is he tries to defang the concept of a murderer by showing it from this way, and he intentionally makes it tedious and monotonous because he's trying to keep it from being romanticized. While we have these very, very sentimental or emotional depictions of serial killers, he kind of goes out of his way to show certain aspects. Like he has one point, like after the little girl's dead, he goes into his bedroom or goes into his kitchen, he makes toast, he brushes his teeth, he does those kinds of things, and it's supposed to show that he's a real person and he's not worth romanticizing. And I think that that is kind of what this film tries to do. There's not really, it kind of feels like a slice of life, like you're just taking a piece of a timeline and you're shown a depiction of it. And there's not a, with some war films, there tends to be like a lot of sentiment. There's a lot of, it tries to establish the camaraderie between soldiers and whatnot. It tries to give you a central conflict. It shows you that soldiers are this really brave, courageous people. And I think that this film, at the very least, one thing it did capture is it didn't make everyone feel like there was a lot of camaraderie. It didn't make it feel like everyone was really brave. It seemed like people were like chaos. Like they were terrified, they were very, very afraid, and they were not being friendly with each other. They were trying to throw each other off boats and things like that. And so that's one thing that I think it did well. It's good in its depiction, as an accurate depiction. It just doesn't necessarily make for the best film.
For the picture that it provides in your head, that is a great description. And while if that was the direction that Nolan was going for, then I applaud him to that. But it does not make a good movie. A good movie, it does not make. It is very, very long, very, very tedious, and again, probably a great depiction of real war. You're sitting there with long periods of lull, followed by bursts of gunfire that probably make you want to pee your pants, and then you're back to the lull. And a lot of people don't come back from that. A lot of people do come home and they have PTSD and things like that, and
Shell shocked.
shell shocked. I've met many of the soldiers who come back and they had crazy things going on inside their head and they were never the same. But it doesn't make for a good movie. I don't want to watch that. I do not want to see what is going on over say, in Afghanistan in a real perspective. And I don't know, does that make me selfish? Kind of, maybe, because I don't want to see that, because like it ruins every like image that I have. I don't think war's glamorous. I think war is ridiculous for all intents and purposes. I would never go. You would literally have to drag me kicking and screaming to go to war, because I'm not gonna do it. I don't want to shoot somebody else that I don't know for having ideas that maybe don't match with mine. I don't want to do that, and I don't want to go and fight anybody and possibly die myself because my ideas are different than somebody else's. I have ideas that differ from people in America, but I don't post up at my garage and start rifling people down as they go past. I would rather have like a peaceful solution. But whenever I'm watching it for entertainment value, what I really want to see is Troy. I want to see that guy who is magnificent and he's amazing at something and he's going through and he's mulling through everybody, and I could get behind him, and I forget that it's about war and I just think it's about entertainment. And that's I don't know. I don't know if that's where the movie went wrong, because it probably isn't. It was no character development, there was no story development, it was listless and boring, it took forever to get to anything. But I mean, that's just my general opinion on it.
It kind of brings up the question, and you talked about the walking simulator. You made that comparison earlier. It talks about what a film is supposed to be, and I don't think that a film necessarily has to have certain aspects to succeed as an art, as a piece of art. I don't think it has to have certain criteria. But if you're looking at it from an audience perspective, then don't be upset whenever we have some criticisms in terms of entertainment value. We're wanting to look and watch an entertaining film, and although I can appreciate the technical aspects, like I said, like I mentioned with the sound editing, I thought that that was very, very good. I thought that the scenery was nicely shot. The film had a production budget of 100 million, and you can clearly see it on the screen. It just doesn't have a good use of characters. It doesn't have a good story. It has a good story, but it's not presented in a good way that makes you care about what's happening.
I don't
Aside
know if
from
it has a
just
good story or a good idea. The
it's
concept is fine. The actual way that the concept comes about left me really, really tired.
like I feel like it left a lot of things on the table. Like at one point you mentioned the pilot. You mentioned him. You didn't say his name, and that's a problem because I'm like, that's Tom Hardy. That's Tom Hardy. He should not be so like, but you don't feel like you're watching Tom Hardy. You feel
You
like
don't.
he's a capable actor, and there are a lot of capable actors in this film. Like there's Cillian Murphy, who was
I'm
the
gonna be honest with you. It took me forever to even realize it was Tom Hardy.
there's Cillian Murphy, who is otherwise known for things like he plays Scarecrow in the Batman movies.
George in
Yeah,
the movie, I think
yeah,
his name was
yeah.
Georgie. Or no,
He's
Georgie was the boy. Never mind. I'm sorry, I got that mixed up.
you see him in a lot of Christopher Nolan films. Like Christopher Nolan likes to put certain people in his movies. Like you've also seen Tom Hardy in a couple of his movies. The point is the you don't really feel like you're bringing the best out of these actors, these capable actors. Where I first found out that Christopher Nolan was going to direct this film, maybe it's because I'm not a fan of war-centered films, but I immediately thought, oh, I would much prefer him doing science fiction or doing something of that ilk. But and I realize that that differs from a lot of people, and I don't want to take away from its artistic perspective, but I also don't want to sugarcoat it when I say that the film was a very, very ho-hum experience that I couldn't wait to be over.
And my last bit is to say that it definitely was no shaving Ryan's privates, and we definitely didn't get that experience with it. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, I make you do this every time, and you hate it, but 1 to 10, what do you got?
I'm just gonna say 5.
I'm gonna say 4, and maybe even lower than that. And I
Honestly,
just
my heart's telling me lower because I didn't enjoy it as much as some films that I've given a 5 out of 10. But I want to give it that just out of respect from like some of the things that I did notice a lot of work was put into.
So that ends this episode of Mishmash Podcast. Please join us on mishmashers.com for Nicholas's review of The Shape of Water, and read on my review for Mindhunter, the new Netflix series that follows two FBI detectives as they try to figure out the mindset of psychopaths and sociopaths. Thank you again.
More beloved dub dub.